I'm super excited. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend and you were able to rest and relax and recharge and reconnect with the people that are important to you in your life. Hello. Hello. I'm so excited for that. Hello. Who's joining us? Gonna give them just a minute, let folks get joined here. Super excited. Kayla took a day off, so you're here with me today. It'll be probably a little bit shorter just because there's just one of me, not a lot of conversation, but I'm really excited to talk about what is it we're talking about today? I should probably pull up my notes so that I know, right? Talk to me in the chat. Let me know how things are going. What'd you do this weekend? What was exciting? What was fun? Anything out of the ordinary, or was it just a regular, relaxing weekend? Super excited. All right. Well, welcome to Mindset Monday, where independent patient advocates like us come together to start the week with positivity and inspiration. I am Nicole Broadhurst, and I'm typically here with my co-host, Kayla Thompson-Riviere. However, she has taken a much-deserved day off, so it's just me this morning. But today we do have a powerful conversation to help guide us through the week of this new week of advocacy. So let's dive in and get inspired. Last week, we talked about flexibility feeling very generous, and that structure is what actually works and helps us build our practices. And so that was that again, that whole idea of structure being about standards and not about personality, right? But this week, I want to layer add another layer onto what that same decision looks like and how we show up with that, okay? Because the truth is, once that you accept that structure is what works, right? Not necessarily flexibility, but structure, then now you have to confront where you're still avoiding the structure in your practice. And in most advocacy practices, I'm going to tell you, this shows up, the avoidance of structure shows up most clearly and most quickly in pricing. And so here's what I want to talk about this week. Flat fee isn't the risk. Vagueness is the risk. All right. So there's three things. You guys know I love my three things. I want to talk about how flat fee service pricing doesn't create loss. It actually is undefined scope that does. And I want to talk about how client-funded practices require predictability. And I want to talk about how this risk, when we have these risks or perceived risks that we think are risks, they're best managed through structure, not avoidance. And this is all how we think about risk, okay? And of course, we all have different levels of risk aversion, right? Or risk tolerance. And so I want to talk about that as well today. So the bottom line is this, is that a lot of us, most of us think that this flat fee is dangerous for us because we might undercharge. But the truth is that it's unstructured scope that is truly dangerous and guarantees that we'll have underperformance and overwork, right? And that's not what I want to see for you in your practice. So let's get into the mindset shift around all of this. I want to talk a little bit about undefined scope, right? And what happens, because I think that it starts with the foundation of boundaries. And I don't know about you, but boundaries are, even today, they're very hard for me. There was a time in my life where I, I'm embarrassed to say, but the truth is that I had no boundaries. And I wanted to do whatever needed to be done, whatever other people thought needed to be done, whatever I thought needed to be done. And really, it created a world of chaos because there was no ending to me and beginning to others. And I think and when we talk about these pricing things and getting undefined scope, I think this is the undercurrent of the problem, is that we as professional advocates don't always draw the clear boundary and set ourselves up for this is what I do and this is where I end. And this is also the defining line of where my client begins or my colleagues begin and their responsibilities begin. And I think that if we can shift how we think about boundaries from being undecided and unclear and flexible and generous and all of those things that we tend to think about, and start to think about them as clarifying and clear. I can't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to somebody and we were talking about the boundaries. We were talking about boundaries. And one of the conversations we had was that a farmer, and it may have been Kayla and I can't remember, but a farmer has clear fences around his property, right? To keep animals in and safe from the outside world. And nobody ever gets upset about that, right? Everybody just kind of assumes and accepts that there's going to be boundaries, right? That the farmer's farmland and the animals and the livestock are going to be contained within his or her, the farmer's farmland. And everybody assumes that. In fact, I would go so far as to say that if a farmer didn't have fences and their cows were roaming everywhere, that probably neighbors would get upset, right? Like, why are your cows in my front yard eating my lawn? Yeah, probably not going to be super happy about that, right? And I think that is a beautiful illustration of boundaries. And specifically, when we're talking about flat fee services, the things that get in the way of that are, well, if I say I'm going to do everything they need for a flat fee, what is everything they need? Right? We need to define the fence. Everything that they need includes whatever's inside the fence, it includes, and what's outside the fence, it clearly excludes, right? And when we think about drawing that box and saying, okay, you know what I can do? And I want to say this very clearly, you get to pick. Honestly, the first thing that I did for the very, very first flat fee service package that I offered was define what they got for $500 a month. And that was basically a weekly call with me, 30 minutes every week with me to make sure that they were on track with their plan. And that was it. Anything outside of that was going to be an add-on, was going to be, it'd have to adjust and hear me clearly that there were times when I was in that package and I was doing that thing and open enrollment came up and I'll never forget this. Somebody asked me, it's open enrollment, can you help me choose my insurance plan? And I said, sure, that's part of what we're doing. Yeah, no, I should not have done that. I only did it once because it required an additional um, effort and labor for me, right? And I didn't get paid for that because I included it in a service package that it should not have been included in. So moving forward, that is an add-on. You can be in service with me on a monthly retainer, and if we get to open enrollment and you need help choosing your plan, that is an added service. And it's also one that I market directly to my current clients during open enrollment and say, hey, if you need this, we can add this on, and this is what it looks like. So to go back to what I was talking about, boundaries and that defined scope, pick your price point, pick your service, what's included, what's excluded, and understand that those boundaries are what actually make you and your client feel safe. All right. So undefined scope is when we have a price point and we have no clear sense around what that price includes. Okay. So the second thing we wanted to talk about today is that client-funded practices require predictability. So I know that if you're here and you're listening to this, that you have at least some sort of understanding and experience with this particular point, because either your sales calls are unpredictable, your schedule is unpredictable, your something about in your practice, you have experienced unpredictability. And as a result, you have felt the instability of that, right? Like, oh, it's Monday. What am I supposed to be doing today? How many woke up like that? Monday, what am I supposed to be doing today? And full transparency, so did I. So did I. I woke up, I was like, huh, it's Monday. What are we doing today? And I had to pull out my calendar and see what's on my calendar for today. The only thing I knew for sure was that at 9 Eastern, I'm showing up here for Mindset Monday. Um, all right, so we require predictability if we're going to have a sustainable practice. All right, and when we set clear boundaries, guess what that gives us? It gives us some predictability, right? Because we know what's included and we know what's excluded in that. All right. Now, I also want to talk about your clients. Your clients need that predictability as well. They're looking to you to create that predictability and that certainty. Okay. And when you give them flat fee service pricing, you're providing that container for them to feel safe in. I know one of our calls earlier this week or last week, we talked about containers for our services. And I love the idea. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to be a grandma this summer. And so our daughter is pregnant. She's expecting in June. We're very excited. And we're talking lots about baby things. And one of the things that we're talking about is a crib and a pack and play and those types of things. Now, I love to think about this as that container, right? It's a container. Now, when you say it like that, oh, we're going to put the baby in the container, it's a little bit harsh, right? But the truth is that we have these containers for safety so that the baby doesn't roll off the bed, so that the baby doesn't fall and get hurt. So the baby, right? And so again, this flat fee container that we are creating for our clients is creating that safety and predictability for our clients and for us. All right, because the truth is that vagueness creates distrust, right? If we can't be super clear on what we're talking about, if we don't have a very clear defined scope, and if we're not clear and predictable in our communications, all of that leaves our clients feeling very, very insecure and wondering where things are going and what's happening. And remember, the reason that they're coming to us is because nobody is giving them that clarity anywhere else, right? And so it is really the onus of what we're doing to be that steady guide that is giving them exactly what they need, helping them understand and helping them feel safe in this journey with the confidence to navigate it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about risk. Okay. Because we talked about the risk of creating these flat fee services and am I going to be underpaid? And here's what I want to tell you. Regardless of where you are on the scale of risk tolerance, you may be very, very risk tolerant and taking lots of risks, or you may be not taking risks. But regardless of where you are on that scale, what I want you to know is that it is impossible to eliminate the risk. Okay, that's just not going to happen. There's always going to be some level of risk in what you're doing. However, when you shift this mindset, what's going to happen is that you're not going to be afraid of the risk. What you're going to do is you're going to structure the risk and you're going to mitigate it as much as possible, right? You're going to define timelines. You're going to define deliverables so that you have very clear expectations with your clients. You're going to define all of these boundaries. You're going to put your fence up on your property, own what's yours, know where your land begins and others start, where yours ends and others begin. You're going to put yourself into the baby crib. You're going to have those rails on the side that are going to keep you safe. And if you don't have all of this decided and clarified, and I'm going to stretch and say I want it written down somewhere, okay? Then if they're not written down, if they're not clarified, then you're not pricing wrong. You're just leading loosely. I want you to lead strong, not loose. All right. So remember, this flat fee pricing is not dangerous because you might undercharge. It's dangerous when you don't have a clear scope of work with very clear boundaries. All right. And so that's the real risk. So if your pricing is feeling risky, it's usually because your scope or isn't defined and isn't written down somewhere. All right. If this tension is showing up in your pricing right now, okay, I want you to know that we're going deeper in this inside the video vault. We're also going to be dropping a YouTube video over on our YouTube channel, which is at Patient Advocate CEO. Get over there, subscribe. We drop new content every week on that channel. Because remember, clarity lives in the structure, right? That's where we're headed. That's where I want to take you. So, my question and challenge to you this week is where in your current offer is the scope of your pricing assumed instead of clearly defined? I want you to look at your offers. I want to look at your pricing. I want you to look at where the scope needs to be honed in and clarified. All right. So that's a wrap for today's Mindset Monday. I am so grateful for this community of independent patient advocates, and I hope that today's conversation empowers you in your work and in your personal life this week. I want you to be sure to show me how you're applying it inside of your advocacy practice, and we'll see you back here next Monday for more inspiration. Have a great week, all.